Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for all your good wishes for Elvis, but he seems fine now. He's eating like a pig again. He was always a greedy cat, whereas Mojo's a fussy little picky cat. Who's also done a runner today because it's raining, so I haven't even seen him today. I don't know where he goes, but he's freaked out by the sound of the rain when he's indoors, so he runs away out in the rain. I don't know where he goes, but he obviously has somewhere where he thinks is better than being here. So he'll be back later when the rain stops. Well, stop now. This is more about a what's going on video than what's there now. I mean, what's there now we had a look at. We did the everything in bloom, so it's more a what's going on. I had to water all my pots yesterday and try and catch up. I've still got the holy clay pots to do. And well, if it looks like it's going to be a sunny day, I'll do the mounts today, otherwise I'll actually leave them. We've got this Orangus up here, which is the spikes are pushing on nicely, so this is a what's to come down the line. We've got 4 nice spikes pushing out, and it's funny actually because the spikes just look like sticks until this point when the little green buds show, and suddenly the sticks seem to be coming to life, which is just what's happening now. We've had some new leaves on the plant because some of the older ones are dropping. That's its way. 2 plants there actually, 2 spikes on each. So we've got that to come. Some Orangus blooms down the line. I'm keeping my eye on the Oncidium types, especially the twinkles. Let's get the big one down. Oh. Come on, down you come. So this one is just a mass of new growths. The plant itself, the original plant before all these new growths pushed out, wasn't actually that good looking. But I mean, you can see, you know, I mean that older bulb there with the leaves that are starting to go, I mean that pushed out 2 strong new growths. So the new growths have come out everywhere. It's going to be a very good looking plant, and I think it's going to be a mass display as well, because many of those new growths are in a similar stage. There's going to be some staggering because a few are a bit behind, but it's done a massive root system this year. It's really gone mad. So it's a good plant now, and once some of these older leaves fall off or get helped, it depends what I want to do with it. Depending on when this comes into bloom, this might go to one of the Orchid Society's competition tables. It might even make it to one of the shows, because the autumn shows will be coming up soon. The Bournemouth Orchid Society show is at the end of September. And then the Wessex Orchid Society show follows in October. Now that might be about right for this one. But there's no sign of spikes yet, but they should be coming soon. So I'm just looking into some of the largest of the new growths to see if I can see anything. Nope, nothing yet, but they will come. And I mean, each one of those new growths should have a spike, and many will have 2. Who knows, we may even get 3. So that's to come. Not showing signs yet, but I know it will. You know, there is some expectation. And this one I'll get down as well, because I was just looking at its growth, and its growth this year has gone absolutely mad. And yet it hasn't bloomed yet. You have to bear in mind, this effectively was a plant that was, although it looks like one big plant, it's not. It was pieces off of a mother plant. So all of this growth is new, so it's not mature growth. But nonetheless, we should be getting some blooms on this soon, I would think. Yeah, I think you know, I'll have to find somewhere to put it down, because I can't hold it still enough in one hand. But that looks like a bud forming there. Where else? It's going to be on the older parts. Oh, I don't know though. It looks like there might even be one there. I mean, that's towards the tip of a growth. This one has bloomed prior to it being sort of split up and remounted, and I don't think it's ever had more than 1 or 2 blooms at the same time. Tiny little blooms, and a very attractive fragrance. It's sort of like marzipan. Reminds me of Christmas when it's in bloom. But it's growing incredibly well. It's never grown this well before. The extensions have pushed out ridiculous, and unfortunately that does mean there's an awful lot of aerial roots, which without the humidity in here, the plant, those extensions wouldn't do that well, you know, unless they were sprayed frequently or something. But with the air humidity, they survive okay. I mean, all those root tips are growing. It's produced a lot of growth. Yeah, so that's coming on. That is a polybulbum, something or other. Epidendrum polybulbum. I think it's called dinema now, whatever a dinema is. We all know what an epidendrum is, but many people have heard of a dinema. Well, the name changes come and go. That's life, I'm afraid, with the orchid world. The one thing that doesn't change much, though, is the Dendrobium world. The world of Dendrobiums stays pretty static. You very rarely get name changes, which is good because I've got a lot. Although a few do cross over the various sections now and again and move from one to another. But my Psychopsis is now open, and that's looking good. I mean, in the world of orchid blooms, that is unusual. You could say spectacular, but yeah, it's still one of my favourite shaped blooms, and the colours as well. I mean, it's not just the shape. The colours in these are, you know, very, very deep and vibrant. Very nice blooms. That's that one. Now this sea of green back here is also a Dendrobium. This is Chrysotoxum. And I noticed yesterday I had to get some more raffia out because the two new growths up there are almost getting up to full height now, and they were hanging out sideways. And although that might look natural, it would mean those canes would just be in the way and would take up space that another plant could have. So I had to strap them in. And I've just noticed now. Oh God, you know what? I thought that was a new spike coming. I was just going to say that's flipping unusual because this is a spring bloomer, and it is an annual bloomer. It doesn't tend to bloom on and off like some do. So yeah, we'll forget that. But the new growths have pushed on well. I think there's four new canes on there. There's one at the front here that you can see pushing on. Hasn't opened its leaves yet, but pushing on nicely. And this was a giant plant. When I repotted it, it naturally split into the old part of the plant and the better part of the plant. I did actually pot up the old part of the plant on the grounds it may shoot out and form, you know, some side shoots which could then be separated off, but it didn't make it. But the main plant looks good. I don't think there's a tatty leaf on that plant, so hopefully this blooms on successive years. It's one of these that sort of blooms out the side. All the leaves are at the top of the cane, and the spikes come out from the edges of the nodes. But it doesn't only bloom once, it can produce blooms on successive years. 2, possibly 3, before the cane starts looking old and tired and dumps its leaves. They do dump their leaves eventually, but not, you know, not annually by any means. I'd say 3 to 4 years it will hold its leaves. A bit like a Dendrobium phalaenopsis from that point of view. Should hold its leaves a long time if it's happy. So that's that. What else? Something else I saw yesterday. Oh, whether this is going to bloom or not as a consequence of it doing something incredibly silly, we'll get it out and have a look, because I've never seen this before on this type of plant. This is my Dracula Bella that's pushed out a lot of new leaves lately. So it's growing nicely. Unfortunately, it keeps aborting its spikes. That's probably just lack of humidity, because I don't believe I mean, that's soaking wet. It's not like it's drying out. But it keeps producing them and then they abort. But what it's doing now is where the aborted bud was, it's shooting out again. And it's doing it here too. Now, whether these buds will make it or not, I really don't know. But I've got a feeling that although this keeps producing new spikes, it's probably not actually going to successfully bloom until the weather cools down a bit. But, you know, there's a new spike there coming out the side, new one coming out near the bottom here by my little finger. So it keeps producing them, and it keeps producing new leaves. So I've got no complaints about the plant itself. But it would be nice to see those blooms again. They are quite a spectacle. Huge as well. What else? Oh, we had an accident. This, what is this now? Epidendrum nocturnum. That grows quite well for me. Those of you who like the old roots. It certainly does its thing with the roots. Old ones branch out. I've got two that, well, I've got a root there that's effectively two fused together. Now, that's an unusual sight. It's a single root that then headed off in two directions and stuck together and then spread out again. That's unusual. Another new cane starting, so it's growing well, but the spikes on this extend. They appear to die after blooming, and then they start going green again and start to move. And this is the latest cane here, and although that looks like a nice spike coming, some idiot knocked the end off of it. This plant is one of those that, you know, the canes are long and stiff and they tend to get in the way a bit. But we do have a bud on one of the oldest canes here. In fact, probably the second oldest cane. I've got one really old one here. That was what was on it when I got it, I think. And then this one. The cane itself is old and tired, but it's shooting out. Now this is a pane. I'll put a picture of the only bloom I've ever managed to get to open, but it self-pollinates as it opens. And so by the next day the bloom's completely collapsed, often before it even opens properly, which is a right pain. But apparently when you get a plant with lots of canes, all with buds on, and you get more than one bloom opening at a time, they will hang in there. So I'm told. So far I haven't had the chance to find out, but I like the plant. You know, it grows well. It pushes up some good new canes, does the new roots very frequently, so I'm happy to keep it. And we'll see what happens with this. Blooms they're quite like a brassivola looking bloom. Similarities there, very long spindly petals and sepals with a sort of frilly shaped lip. And I think this one's sort of white with shades of green from memory, but I'll stick a pop up. There's too many ups in there. As long as they're ups and not downs, that's all we worry about. The little bulbophyllum is doing well, just keeps blooming. They're not spectacular, but they're attractive. They're a real deep, rich, reddish purple, but very small. But yeah, it keeps blooming. I'd really like to know what the hell it is, because it's not what was on the label. Nonetheless, it blooms, and all these spikes, including more than one off a bulb, are coming off the previous growth, not the latest growths, which in theory means once the new growths get going, what are now the latest growths will bloom next. So that would be good. So that was that. What else did we see as we were going around? I have I won't get it out because I'd have to move too much stuff, but over in there, that plant there with lots of new growths on, Oncidium type, is actually Miltonia flavescens. And talking to several other people that have got this, and they've managed to get it to grow very well, nobody's got one to bloom yet. And that includes me. I've had that plant well over 2 years and it's still not bloomed, including on mature growths. But I now have another load of new growths and roots going all over the place. We shall see. I'm wondering whether, being a Miltonia, it's one of the really highlight ones and it's just not getting enough light. But anyway, it's been moved from a position on the shelf to much closer to the glass as these new growths progress. So we'll see what happens. It would be nice to see some blooms on the flipping thing, I must admit. So I've got my head in a bush here. This brassia, has taken over the world due to size of pot and size of plant. Flipping monster. Also introduced aphids into my greenhouse. Thank you very much, Sarah. But she did tell me it's not like they snuck a ride home with me. I knew they were coming. And if I hadn't been such an idiot and wanted to get the plant in here and show off its lovely blooms, if I'd had any sense, I'd have got rid of the aphids outside before I brought the plant in. Duh. Anyway, it happened. I think we're winning. I don't think there's many left lying around now. We've decked them. But lovely new growths on this plant. There's 5, in fact. The other got the lovely new growth pushing up here. Another one here with associated roots pushing out. And then round this side, if it'll turn around without knocking stuff, we've got another 3 lovely new growths pushing up here. It's why I chose the plant. It had 2 more new growths than any of the others, so I thought, that's the one for me. And looking forward to that when it blooms again. Now what we have to do is put a bit of imagination in. It's on a top shelf because it's so tall and big. And it needs the light, so that's fine. The spikes are 3 to 4 foot long. Is our imagination working? Where the hell am I going to put it? Once those spikes start, you have to bear in mind the spikes on Oncidium alliance types are induced by the conditions they're growing in, so right amount of light and all that sort of stuff. But once the spikes start to grow, it's not a problem to change the conditions. So I can stick the plant down on the floor where it's quite shaded because the spikes are already growing. You see what I mean? If I do it now, I might not get any spikes. But once the spikes start, the light and associated conditions have already done their job. They're highly unlikely to ever abort due to a change like that. Not once they're going, if you know what I mean. Except for Phalaenopsis, they can be a bit finicky if you change their conditions, especially when they're in bud. You can often get bud blast on those if you change stuff dramatically. What I am looking forward to over here is the first time blooming on my oh, come on, brain. It is early in the day. I'm going to have to look at this. Encyclia prismatocarpa. Come on. Concentrate. But I do have a nice spike. The lower buds are starting to show patterning and a little bit of colour, so it should be open soon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, heading up towards 20 blooms on that spike. And the first time they'll have been seen in here, because that's never bloomed before. While we're up here, this is my Dendrobium lindleyi, was aggregatum. Keeps chopping and changing this one. Well, we keep chopping and changing it. The plant doesn't change, obviously. Now, the latest new growth on that is a beauty, sticking out to the right there. Larger than anything on the plant. And it's looking good. This has been grown on from a seedling. And it's grown on quite rapidly. Not since, I got this year, so this is new to me, shall we say. And I've had 2 new growths on it, the 2 out to the right. And what I have now got is a good root system. So this is now a nice, strong, healthy plant, grown on from a seedling. I'll be pleased if this blooms in the spring, but it may not. It may still be too young. And I think it will. I think I may get a spike or 2 certainly from the latest growths. I'd like to see some more growths. I only got 2, but what actually happened with this is the direction of growth out to the left of the plant. You can see the aborted new growth there, and it hasn't replaced it. It hasn't tried again from that area yet. But then it's obviously been pushing its energy out to the right of the plant. We shall see. But now got a good root system. I'm really pleased with the progress of that. It started off as quite a nice plant. Didn't have brilliant roots, but it had some. And I thought, well, if it takes to its mount and gets going this year, we may get some blooms next year. Very, very similar to my Jenkinsii, just basically a bigger plant for a start. You know, the canes are sort of twice as big easily. And on top of that, the spikes come out from a different place, and the blooms are many per spike. Jenkinsii has a few, 3 or 4 I think per spike. This can go head up more towards sort of 8, 9, 10 on a good bloom, and they are larger. So this is just all round a larger plant and more prolific as far as the blooming is concerned once it gets to that size. It may not be, not yet. May have to wait another year, but well, we can wish. We do a lot of that in the orchid world, don't we? You know, wish you'd bloom. And yeah, what else? As I was going round, Insa, I think it was when I showed this, and he made a comment and he said, "And is there anything else you've got lurking that we haven't seen before?" Well, I did show this last year when I bought it, but then you know, it didn't do much in the winter, and then I put it outside. It's only just come back in here, and I noticed since it's come back in here it's darkened. The colours have become richer, so maybe it was the light was a bit too bright for it, but it's still growing new things, whatever you call these, pitchers or things, fly catching things, that's what they are. Yeah, so I was looking round and thinking yesterday, what have I got that just never gets filmed? This one hardly ever gets looked at. Its flowers are tiny, and it's a bit of a pot full. It's actually a maxillaria, and it's a climber, a rambler. Its pot is buried down in there inside the black one. This has grown a lot this year. Now at one point during the year it had a problem. I started getting yellowing on some of the leaves. It doesn't seem to be doing it on the new growths, yeah? So maybe it was getting just a bit too much light. Hasn't bloomed for a while now. Has lovely tiny little red flowers. Not very orchid-like in appearance, quite honestly, but very attractive, a good red. And at the moment, it's growing. It's just growing everywhere. It's branching. It has a nature. You can see sort of a bulb here that splits off in 2 directions, yeah, and it just keeps repeating that sort of process. And then the new growths on the end of these will split again. So it's a bit of a mad grower. Yeah, but it's growing well, and that doesn't come out to get filmed very often because it doesn't bloom very often. It's one of those that blooms on and off. Boy, would that be a spectacle if I could get a mass blooming. But to achieve that on this type of plant, you need the majority of all the new growths to start and progress at the same rate so that they all mature together. And as you can see on here, I've got growths at all stages, from just starting to pushing on to starting to form bulbs. So it's probably still not going to do a mass blooming. It might be nice if it did. And another one I thought I'm not sure I've ever filmed it, apart from when I bought it perhaps. I'll have to dig it out. Are you going to stay there? You'll stay. Yeah. Always wary of that basket, it's so heavy. Let's get this out of the way. Whoa. This is the problem with tall pots. That's a Dendrobium phalaenopsis type, that's the white one. That was an unhealthy looking plant. It did bloom back in the winter, but it seems to have perked up. A repot, yeah, a more open mix and a smaller pot. Now we've got 2 nice new growths. So, lovely colour on the canes when they're new. Gorgeous sort of purple-red striping. That's not what I was after. What I was after was this one that's desperately trying to fall over. And this is Dendrobium delicatum. And it was bought as a single kiki with a little new growth. So starting at the back, this was the kiki, still got its leaves, and it pushed up a single new growth, and then it did it again, And now it's done it again. And what we've got this time is an extra inch or two on the height. So this is now heading up to the full-size cane that it should be. And this is my only Kingianum type. It's a Kingianum cross that occurs naturally in the wild. So although it's Dendrobium delicatum, it's supposed to have an X on the front of that and a lowercase d, apparently. But nonetheless, I think that might bloom. Not now, it's a winter rester, and it should really cool down as well, this one. Quite happy going down to sort of 5 degrees C, this one. It's not going to happen, but you know. I'm not going to attempt to force this into any blooming. It'll do it when it's ready. But yeah, that's my only Kingianum type. Nobody ever asks, why haven't you got Kingianum or Berryoda? Well, I've had them both. I had a massive Kingianum cross once. It was on a mount up here, and it took up half that wall. It was absolutely ridiculous, and bloomed profusely and produced kikis like they were going out of fashion. It just wouldn't stop. I gave the whole thing away in the end because I couldn't accommodate it. It was just getting far too big for its boots. And quite honestly, I'm not that impressed with the Kingianum type blooms. They don't do a lot for me. For the size of the plant, the blooms are quite small. But you get a mass blooming on one, they're quite a show. Now this blooms white. This has not been bought for the blooms as to what they look like. This has been bought for the fragrance, which is one of the most powerful orchid fragrances I have ever come across. I have a friend at Bournemouth Orchid Society who has a good specimen-sized plant, and he usually brings it to our spring show in February if it's out in time. And I can remember the first show he bought that in, I could actually sense the fragrance on that in the hallway outside before it even gone into the main hall where all the plants were. And the fragrance was so strong I couldn't find the plant. It took me quite a while because it filled the room. So it could have been any of the plants, if you see what I mean. It was such a strong fragrance. Probably too much for some people maybe, but yeah, so we may get some blooms on that this year. Yeah, and we're going to have another go at these. Unfortunately, this was sitting underneath the brassia. This one got the worst of the aphids. But I'm going to have to give that another clean off. Luckily they're not spreading too bad, but as I said, the thing you've got to watch with aphids is the sticky substance that they excrete gets on your leaves, and then it can go mouldy and form sooty black mould, one of those two. Anyway, so Dendrobium delicatum, I don't think that's been on film, well, certainly not very often. Up in the Cattleya world, I've still got to water these today, so I haven't had a good look at them recently. I've got a feeling that this one down here produced a new growth before, but this is the first new growth that I believe is now full size that did produce a sheath, and it had a shadow in there that doesn't seem to be moving, so I'm not sure that's going to bloom now. It might abort, and then it probably will on the next one if it doesn't on that one. This little one's got a nice spike coming again. This hasn't long gone out of bloom. This is the whatnot thing. Cattleya little lemon drops crossed with Miltonia why not whatnot. You can see the old spike that's just gone over. The cane that bloomed is already starting its new growth, and this growth was slightly behind. So the blooms are slightly behind, which means it's staggered obviously, which is nice. That growth's producing new roots, as is the other one. And this will produce a new growth once the blooms go, same as that one did. So that's taking off in 2 directions, which is nice. And that's a lovely little compact plant, that one. Sorry, I'm just clambering in the bushes here at the moment. This is going to bloom. It's already got its sheath. I don't think the buds are forming yet, but it's going to bloom. And somewhere on the plant, if I can find it, it's all tangled up with the other stuff. Anyway, there's, oh, here it is, right under my nose, duh. There's 2 new growths on this, both with sheaths. They should both bloom, and I've got a good feeling that they may both come out together. That'll be good. That's the bright orange Cattleya type. My Laelia anceps spikes are pushing on, nice and strong. This one's slightly behind. That's good, because they don't last a huge amount of time, and hopefully that means they will open successively. So we should get some blooms on this one first, followed by this one, not long after. So that's good. Again, that's heading off in 2 directions. Had a rest for a year when it didn't bloom, which was my fault. This thing here, this is the angel heart, probably the most vigorous Cattleya I've got. This was the front end of the plant that was taken off. The new growth that's pushed out there yeah, that's got a good sheath in it, so that should bloom. And the manky piece of the plant, the back end of the plant, pushed up 2 new growths that have also both got sheaths on. So we do have some things going on in the Cattleya front. We should get some blooms down the line. The Sotoanum, the spikes are starting to make headway now. They're actually starting to clear the leaves. I haven't counted how many, but an average of 3 up to 5 on one new growth, and 4 or 5 new growths. I got a feeling that's going to be a staggered blooming, because some of the spikes are way ahead of the others, but that'll just prolong its blooming. That's good. That's the one of the parents of the twinkles, which is odd. I mean, the other parent is quite a tiny little Oncidium. The combination of the two makes a medium to small size plant. But when you see this one in bloom, you can see the twinkle in it, and the fragrance is good. So you can see where the twinkle gets it from. But you know, if you put the Sotoanum next to a twinkle, it's difficult to imagine that it's one of the parents. But it's the other one that dwarfed it down. You know, so that's the nature of hybridization, is to get traits from both parents, and then the farther down the line you get with subsequent crosses, you know, you can start introducing other colours or possibly a fragrance, and sometimes your hybrids start losing vigour. So you then take your hybrid and cross it back with something like this that's just powerful and vigorous. So you take it back to a species to put that vigour back in it again, or perhaps bring back the colour. So anyway, some things going on, and some things to look forward to. Some predictable and some first timers. One of my Restrepias down there has decided to chuck blooms out all over the place. It's the only one with blooms on at the moment, but last time when we did the everything in bloom on the 8th, there weren't any there, so all these have arrived quite quickly in succession. But, tiny little blooms, can't really see them from here. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for today. This Pinguicula is doing incredibly well this year. I've never seen this many blooms on a single plant, not one of mine anyway. You know, it's got more coming, and some that have gone. This just really just keeps at it, just keeps going. Lovely little plant. And yeah, the others are doing okay, blooming on and off and growing. That's all you can ask for. And I did put one outside to see if it would feed itself, but then the weather changed and it turned colder at night, and also it started to rain more frequently. I don't want them actually getting soaking wet, although in the wild they'd get soaking wet, but I didn't want to risk, you know, adverse conditions, so I brought it back in again. But this one's got a lot more dots on it than any of the others, so I think it did work, but it was only out there about 6 hours. It wasn't out there long. I think I may try putting them out for a couple of days when I've got suitable weather, keep them out the sun, you know, keep them shaded, just see if they'll pick up some flies to help feed them. If they don't get many in here now, they've done the job too well. It's a pity they don't attract aphids, but they just don't. Anyway, I've got things to do, so yeah, just a quick look round. stuff going on, things to look forward to. I've got some kikis coming on down here. This is an assortment in here, including one. I don't even know what it is. It obviously came off a plant at some point. But this lot up here, they are all the Friedrichsianum. Are they? No, they're not. They're all the other one. The one that has the bulbous bits halfway up the canes. I've forgotten. But they all came off the mother plant. So I've got them, there's, how many's in there? 2, 4, 6, about 8. So those will go off somewhere else, somewhere down the line. Some of these are Hercoglossum, the bigger ones. They're already spoken for, waiting for a suitable time to post off. They've grown quite a lot since they were taken off the plant. Oh yeah, that's just reminded me, the person that hasn't got them that should have is the same person that should have the Peter Comp that hasn't. And while I was watering yesterday, I thought, I'm going to find that plant, and I found it. Guess what? It's got a spike on it. Quite honestly, it still hasn't got a good root system. This one has. It was 2 pieces, 2 separate pots. Now, this one has done roots. The other one's nowhere near as good as far as roots are concerned, but it has got some now. That's the reason it didn't get posted, was it was insecure in its pot without a root system. And I thought, giving it even more hassle by sticking it in a box and all that sort of stuff is just going to stress it too much. So I didn't post it at the last Orchids to Go session. But it will go in the next Orchids to Go session with some kikis. I'm going to take another look at the plant next time I water it and assess whether I should let that spike grow or not. I may end up taking that spike off, and then that will push it to produce another new growth, which will help add to the root system, obviously, and get for a better plant farther down the line. But I'll work on that next time I pick the... It's funny, I still didn't put a tag on it. It still says Sherry Baby, but I know it's not. The Sherry Baby that I split, I had a look at those, and I thought, you're all at the same stage of development. And then I found one that wasn't, and saw the spike, and I thought, right, that's the Peter Comp. Because logically, it was a similar sized plant at a similar stage of development, so logically it should produce a spike at roughly the same time. So anyway, it's been found. That's the important thing. And I think that was Paul. So you will get some stuff when we get to the next Orchids to Go, and I'm in a boxing and wrapping up mood, which I don't get very often. It's hard work, but it's still there. And that's my phone going. Right, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Oh, sorry about that, rudely interrupted. Film quiz, an easy one and a hard one. Easy one, expression, I will tell you how he lived. Yeah, so we'll have the actor, and if you can pronounce the name of the character, by all means. That's the easy one. And then the harder one is, are you like a crazy person? So who said it? Actress and character. And who did they say it to? Actress and character. And the film. See what you can do with those two then? One of them's far too easy.